Jaya Gopi Janapala Yashodanandana Srimad-Bhagavatam. Hari Bol.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Virayet. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyadesh Tarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Haribol.
Hari Hari.
We are continuing with the pastime of King Ranjana. And just began chapter 26 yesterday. Devamadava Prabhu was explaining how, after thoroughly enjoying life with his wife in the kingdom, now King Ranjana ready to go out for hunting. And so we're going to get a little bit more into that today. We're going to cover four verses. And
which chapter?
This is chapter 26, beginning with text 5. So, we'll chant the Sanskrit of the first verse, and I'll just read through the texts. Text 5. Asurim Vittimashritya Ghoratma Niranugraha Nyahanam Nishitar Banar Vaneshu Vanagocharan. At that time, translation, at that time, King Puranjana was very much influenced by demonic propensities. Because of this, his heart became very hard and merciless. And with sharp arrows, he killed many innocent animals in the forest, taking no consideration. I'll just read through the four texts and we'll go back and talk about the purports. Text 6. Tirteshu pratidrishteshu raja medhyan pashunvane yavad artam adam rupto hanyad itiniyam yate. Translation. If the king is too attracted to eating flesh, he may, according to the directions of the revealed scriptures on sacrificial performances, go to the forest and kill some animals that are recommended for killing. One is not allowed to kill animals unnecessarily or without restrictions. The Vedas regulate animal killing to stop the extravagance of foolish men influenced by the modes of passion and ignorance. Text 7. Ya evam karmaniyatam vidvan purvita manava karmana tena rajendra jnanena nasalipyate. Translation. Narada Muni continued to speak to King Prachinabarhishat. My dear king, any person who works according to the directions of the Vedic scriptures does not become involved in fruitive activities. Text 8, this is the last text for today. Anyata karma kurvano mana rudho nibhadyate guna pravaha patito nakta pragno vrajat yadha. Translation. Otherwise, a person who acts whimsically falls down due to false prestige. Thus, he becomes involved in the laws of nature, which are composed of the three qualities, goodness, passion, and ignorance. In this way, a living entity becomes devoid of his real intelligence and becomes perpetually lost in the cycle of birth and death. Thus, he goes up and down from a microbe in stool to a high position in the Brahmaloka planet. So this is Narada Muni's commentary here, where he's kind of breaking the allegory to give a little bit of a lesson, which I think this is like the first explicit lesson that he's giving so far in the allegory. And it's significant that this is the first thing that he's emphasizing is mercy, specifically in abstaining from killing other creatures, including animals. Normally, when we think of nonviolence, we think of nonviolence against human beings, because I'm a human being. But real nonviolence applies to all forms of life, and especially to other sentient beings, let's say sentient in the sense of having a developed, there's like vegetables. Sometimes people protest, well, you're killing vegetables when you eat vegetables. And there's truth to that, but it's on a different order of violence, because the consciousness in that body is not nearly as developed. So the suffering that is endured is very different. It's on a whole different level. But it's interesting that Narada Muni is instructing King Prachinabarhishat in this principle first, to abstain from unnecessarily killing others, specifically for the satisfaction of one's tongue. Prabhupada is going to get into this in the purport, that the consequence of this violence to animals, especially to cows, is that you have wars all over the planet, and people, human beings, are being slaughtered just like animals, like other human beings. This is the karmic consequence, the cost of this kind of behavior. So these are beginning principles. A person who wants to be spiritual must first accept a disciplined life. And part of that means checking your activities to reduce the amount of harm you're causing to other people and maximize the benefit you're giving them. So spiritual life begins with discipline. That's why there's the term disciple. When you're ready to formally commit to a spiritual path, then you become the disciple of a spiritual teacher, a guru. And so that discipline involves giving certain things up. And it's powerful. It's a powerful thing to do that, to voluntarily adjust one's life for a higher goal. One friend of mine who grew up in a Christian background and became involved in Christianity in a serious way, giving seminars and so on, like as a lay preacher. He wasn't in the priesthood, but he was functioning as a priest, teaching others, counseling others, traveling. In an act of solidarity with his brother who had some dietary issue and couldn't eat meat anymore, he decided to go vegetarian too, just to kind of support him. And within 1 month, he was driving and saw this Hare Krishna billboard out near the Spanish Fork area. They have at least one billboard near the ISKCON Spanish Fork Temple out in Utah. Remember when we went to Utah and visited that temple? Wasn't that nice? Yeah. So he noticed and he saw, hey, Hare Krishna, I wonder what's that all about? I thought they were just active in the 60s. So he visited and became attracted to the philosophy and became a devotee. He made the switch. He's a full-time Hare Krishna now. And for a while, he was active as a Christian preacher, even while he was also practicing Hare Krishna, Krishna consciousness. And he told me he really felt that it was because he stopped eating meat, that put him in a position that he was able to recognize this is something worthwhile, something worth investigating. Because when we just pursue sensual stimulation, it dulls our intelligence. We can't recognize we can't hear the voice of the Lord, the voice of our conscience, of our super soul, giving us these indications. And meat eating is one of the prominent modes of sense enjoyment. I had friends growing up. Shortly after I became a vegetarian, I was kind of talking to them about it, and they said, yeah, I can see the benefit. I think it's worth doing. Helps the environment, it's ethical. But what can I say? I just love the taste. So it's a purely selfish thing. And if you ask somebody, they'll say, nah, I don't really want to live my life in a selfish way, Like, how do you want to make decisions in life? Based on pure selfishness or based on helping others? Well, I want to make decisions that help others. Okay, so give up eating meat. That helps others. It really does. Some people protest that you have to get a certain amount of protein or other types of nutrients. At least 1 billion people, if not 2, 3, 4 billion. Maybe the majority of the population in the world is surviving. Well, but my background is that I have this type of genetics, and so therefore I need certain types of nutrients that maybe these other countries don't get. What's up?
I want a snack.
You want another snack? You want to ask some Kundapuru if you'd be willing to help you with that? All right, so somebody might protest. Well, yeah, okay, so the people in India can do it because their families have been living as vegetarians for generations. But I can't do it because my genetics demand meat to stay healthy for my body. Well, that also is a untruth. There was a recent documentary put out there. Does anyone know the name of that? These vegan sports stars and athletes. I'll figure it out. It's
What
worth
it was
sharing.
called? Yeah, it
It
was.
was it was kind of publicized. It was this documentary about these super top tier sports stars who were from American background, ordinary people, not like they were all Indians. And they had given up meat. In fact, they gave up all dairy, they took on a vegan diet. And they were performing at their best or even better. So it's not that we need meat to be healthy, nor do we need meat to have tasty food. In fact, since I gave up meat, I took a more active interest in the quality of the food that I eat in the first place. And I eat great. It's delicious. Everything, maybe not everything that I eat is delicious, but it could be. I put a little bit more time and energy into it, So it amounts to laziness. It amounts to a type of spiritual and intellectual laziness to make these kinds of excuses. So we're going to hear a little bit about the consequences of that in this section. So Prabhupada opens up the purport of text 5. I'll read the text again. At that time, King Puranjana was very much influenced by demonic propensities, Asurium. Because of this, his heart became very hard and merciless, and with sharp arrows he killed many innocent animals in the forest, taking no consideration for it. When a man becomes too proud of his material position, he tries to enjoy his senses in an unrestricted way, being influenced by the modes of passion and ignorance. So this is the main theme of this section, is that Narada Muni's first instruction is that when you live in an unrestricted way, then you're opening yourself up to the influence of the lower modes of nature, passion and ignorance. And those qualities can drag down our consciousness into a demonic mode of life. Because it's based on the bodily concept of happiness that is totally self-centered. So Prabhupada continues. He is thus described as asuric or demonic. When people are in a demonic spirit, they are not merciful toward the poor animals. People say these animals aren't even really conscious. They try to say that. They say these animals aren't even really aware, or that they don't have a human soul. They have some kind of soul. But the animal soul is meant for food for the human soul. Sounds like vampirish to me, right? This soul is meant for my, You say, well, what about the vegetables? Well, that's different. Because on the one hand, they don't run away when you try to kill them. It's pretty clear that they're not suffering on the same level, Another thing is they don't bleed. They don't scream and cry out. They don't shed tears. And most importantly, we don't even, as aspiring Vaishnavas, we don't even take those vegetables directly to enjoy them for our own bodily gratification or nourishment. We offer those vegetables to Krishna for his pleasure, because Krishna likes to eat. And so those living entities who are in those plant bodies, actually, if you take dal, like mung dal, and you soak it, it'll all sprout. There's living creatures in there, just dormant. When you soak them, then they sprout. And then we eat them. But we don't eat them until we offer them to Krishna. And when you offer them to Krishna, those souls get some benefit. You say, well, okay, I'll just offer my cow, my steak to Krishna. No. He ain't interested in that. There's a particular form, a manifestation of the divine. Krishna expands as the different demigods, who are temporary roles in this material universe, controlling different aspects of material life. One of them is goddess Durga. Goddess Durga similarly has different forms, different personas that she takes on for different purposes, and one of them is Kali. Kali, very fearsome, terrifying. If you've ever been married, every now and then your wife will channel Kali a little bit to put you in your place.
Stick her tongue
So you feel, stick the tongue out and just kind of, get the eyes really big. You know. Kali one time in the Bhagavatam, these
True story.
true story, true story. These thieves, they worshipped Kali because they thought that would help them be successful in their thieving, because she's kind of a, crazy deity. So they thought, okay, we're kind of unusual. We're not following ordinary religion. We're not going to worship like Indra or Surya. We're going to worship Kali because we're involved in nefarious activities. Anyway, these thieves, they needed a human sacrifice, and they found this dumb, mute guy, young guy. They didn't know he was a pure saint of the highest caliber, Judge Bharat. So they took him, and they were about to offer him as a human sacrifice, kill him or something, cut off his head or whatever, before their deity of Kali. And because he was a pure devotee, Kali manifested in that deity. The deity became animate, fully animate. And all of Kali's associates also appeared. And they began cutting off the heads of all the thieves and holding up the heads and drinking their blood. Just like a Rakshasa. There's a certain species that is very much like a vampire that enjoys the blood of the entities. Like a tiger. Licks the lips, the blood, So that's what you get if you worship Kali. She might at some point just cut off your head, and that's her mercy, putting your sinful life to an end, so that hopefully in your next birth you have a better, character. So Krishna doesn't accept meat, and so we can't offer our meat to God, and so the best thing is to just not eat meat. Prabhupada continues. These people are not merciful to animals, therefore they maintain so many slaughterhouses. Quote, this is technically called suna or himsa, which means the killing of living beings. In Kali Yuga, due to the increase of the modes of passion and ignorance, almost all men are asuric or demonic. Therefore, they are very much fond of eating flesh, and for this end they maintain various kinds of animal slaughterhouses. In this age of Kali, the propensity for mercy is almost nil. Consequently, there is always fighting and wars between men and nations. Men do not understand that because they unrestrictedly kill so many animals, they also must be slaughtered like animals in big wars. This is very much evident in the Western countries. In the West, slaughterhouses are maintained without restriction. And therefore, every 5th or 10th year, there is a big war in which countless people are slaughtered, even more cruelly than the animals. Sometimes during war, soldiers keep their enemies in concentration camps and kill them in very cruel ways. These are reactions brought about by unrestricted animal killing in the slaughterhouse and by hunters in the forest. Proud demonic persons do not know the laws of God or the laws of nature or the laws of God. Consequently, they unrestrictedly kill poor animals, not caring for them at all. You try to explain this to a person who eats meat, and because of the influence, it's a tricky thing. Like, that's the nature of addiction, is that it clouds your intelligence with the modes of passion and ignorance. And so when somebody tries to reason with you, explaining how in this act of, let's say, killing animals and eating them, in that act, you are actually not experiencing pleasure, you're actually bringing suffering on yourself. It's just delayed, you're going to get that reaction. But the nature of addiction is that it clouds the intelligence with the modes of passion and ignorance, and they can't really hear properly. They can't understand that that's harming them. It tastes good. They think it's good, but it actually is bringing about their own suffering in the near future. All right, we're going to move on to text 6. If a king is too attracted to eating flesh, this is Narada Muni speaking, he may, according to the directions of the revealed scriptures on sacrificial performances, go to the forest and kill some animals that are recommended for killing. One is not allowed to kill animals unnecessarily or without restrictions. The Vedas regulate animal killing to stop the extravagance of foolish men influenced by the modes of passion and ignorance. So a king is given license to kill. He has that right, partly because he has to fight in war and be trained, and so killing animals helps to keep his skills sharp. But it's very carefully regulated so that it doesn't become excessive. There's only certain types of animals that are considered permissible to kill, and also certain times and certain places, at a very clearly laid out process for the animal to be then sacrificed so that everyone involved is ultimately uplifted according to the Vedic prescriptions. And so Prabhupada in this purport explains that here, the purport he begins, the question may be raised why a living being should be restricted in sense gratifications. If a king to learn how to kill may go to the forest and kill animals, why should a living entity who has been given senses not be allowed unrestricted sense gratification? People also try to make this argument. They say, well, I have the urge. I have the urge to have sex, or I have the urge to eat meat, and therefore there's nothing wrong with it. It's natural. So this is a common argument that we've been given senses, so why shouldn't we enjoy? But they're missing the point that the human form of life is a special opportunity, a privilege to wake up that this type of bodily pleasure is actually very base, and the soul is meant for higher pleasure, to get a higher taste, to ultimately have a direct experience of God, who's the personification of all bliss, all pleasure. And so by voluntarily restricting our sensual activity, now we can position ourselves to have an eternal life free from suffering. That's the promise of the Vedas. It sounds like a good deal to me. What do you think? Sounds pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's like if you just put $5 in the bank every day. You know, Krishna is saying, if you put $5 in the bank every day, and then after 50 years, I'm going to match every dollar 100 times or 1,000 times. That's the equivalent. You know, he's saying you just put this little effort, just observe these 4 regulative principles, and chant my names, and you'll get the result as if you'll get an even better result than the mystic yogis who used to have to meditate for thousands and thousands and thousands of years in extremely difficult conditions. Just for 100 years, observe these 4 regulative principles, chant my names. Don't offend devotees. Do some sankirtan. You'll get the same result, an even better result than the mystic yogis of Satya Yuga or Treta Yuga. Therefore, the demigods, it said, they are eager to take birth as a human being in Kali Yuga, because the process of religion is very much simplified, and the mercy is really available. This movement of Lord Chaitanya, the mercy is available because we need it. All right. So Prabhupada also mentions that there's cheaters out there, various swamis and yogis who, in the name of being spiritual teachers, tell people you can just continue with your sense gratification. No problem. Just come to me, become my disciple, and I'll let you do whatever you want. No problem. Because it's all spirit. It's all spirit. So this is not authentic yoga. Yoga begins with regulation, discipline, yama niyama. That's Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. If you want to be a yogi, if you want to actually have a spiritual experience, you have to take on some discipline. Just like if you want to become strong physically, you got to lift weights. That takes some effort. It's not easy. You can't just go and lift the 100-pound barbell. You start with the 5 pounds or wherever. So similarly, if you want to have a spiritual experience, you want to have mental and spiritual strength, then you have to practice. And that takes discipline. But Krishna says these are the regulated principles of freedom. Raga, dvesha, vimuktayistu, vishayan, indriyayistaran, akavashya, vidheyatma, prasadam, adhikachati. That one who voluntarily restricts the urges of attachment and repulsion. Because on one hand, we're attached and addicted to harmful activity. On the other hand, we're repulsed from certain things that are very good for us. Sometimes we're not feeling in the mood to chant. We're not feeling in the mood to read or to be with devotees who just want to talk about Krishna. Come on, can we talk about something else? Whatever it might be. So on the one hand, we're repulsed from that which is good for us, and we're attracted to that which is harmful. So Krishna says one who can control those things, can cultivate an identity based on regulative principles, vidheyatma, that one can become a fully disciplined self, that like Plato would talk about the orderly soul. The orderly soul, where everything is in its place. There's no conflict. It's not a soul at conflict with itself. That's the position of every conditioned soul, is they have so many different values, so many different ideas, but they lack the discipline to live up to it. We want to become an orderly soul, vidheyatma. Then prasadam adhikachati. Krishna says, he attains my mercy. I give him mercy. So the more we endeavor to live a regulated, healthy, upright life, the more we will feel the mercy of Krishna. And it will fully replace the pleasure that we used to get, which was very fleeting in the sinful activity, which was just downgrading us, harming us. That mercy will fill up that space of the addiction. And we'll feel bliss, we'll feel pleasure, real pleasure. So Narada Muni is emphasizing this point, which is a general point, but particularly in relation to animal killing here. But then in text 7 and 8, then he talks about the general principle of leading a regulated life. So we'll just read these two texts and discuss a couple more points from the purports. And then we'll open it up if there's any comments or questions. Text 7 and 8. Narada Muni continued to speak to King Prachina Bhargushat. My dear king, any person who works according to the directions of Lord Krishna himself, the directions of the Vedic scriptures, does not become involved in fruitive activities. Otherwise, a person who acts whimsically falls down due to false prestige. Thus, he becomes involved in the laws of nature, which are composed of the three qualities, goodness, passion, and ignorance. In this way, a living entity becomes devoid of his real intelligence and becomes perpetually lost in the cycle of birth and death. Thus, he goes up and down from a microbial stool to a high position in the Brahmaloka planet. So, Prabhupada writes in the purport, just as the government may issue trade licenses in order for its citizens to act in a certain way, the Vedas contain injunctions that restrain and regulate all of our fruitive activities. So it's by living a regulated life that we can become freed from karma. all suffering is a matter of karmic reaction. And all karmic reaction is born from unregulated action. When you regulate your life according to the Vedic principles, then you come to the platform of akarma, or transcendental action. And then you're free, you become liberated. You're freed from the influence of the modes of nature. And you experience Brahman, which Krishna describes in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Brahma bhuta prasanatma nashojati nikanshati. No hankering, no lamenting. Both are miserable. Hankering is miserable. That itch is miserable of hankering, and the lamenting is miserable. Oh, why me? Why did I do this? Or what's wrong with me? It's miserable. Because we're absorbed in the bodily concept of life. We have to identify, I'm a soul. I'm a soul. I'm meant for a spiritual existence. I'm meant for spiritual pleasure. Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman. I am a particle of spiritual substance meant to serve the supreme Brahman, Para Brahman, Krishna. And Prabhupada quotes one very important verse here. He quotes this from the Bhagavad Gita, which is emphasizing this point we've been just describing. Mamma sho jiva loke, jiva bhuta sanatana. That manasashtani indriyani, prakriti stani karshati. That although living entities are my jivas, my parts and parcels, fully spiritual, Krishna says, they're struggling with the mind. Struggling with the mind and senses, being prakriti stani, being situated in the material nature, in the thick of material nature. Unable to give it up. Our material conditioning. And he also says from the Prabhupada also quotes this in the purport from the Bhagavad Gita, Yashashtra vidhim utsrija vartate kamakarata nasasidhim avapnoti nasukam naparangati. That for a person who gives up the regulative principles, if you do not accept the regulated life, which Krishna previously said in the second chapter, that's how you get the prasadam. No prasadam for you. No prasadam for you. No regulated life, no prasadam for you.
That's a super Nazi, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's the prasadam Nazi. Krishna's a little bit of a prasadam Nazi. Oh, no regulated life, no prasadam for you. He says here, Yashastra vidhim utstrija, to give up the vidhis. Before he was saying vidheyatma, that if you can make your very self regulated, you can become an orderly soul, then prasadam adhikachati, you get the prasadam, the mercy. But if you give up the Shastra vidhis and you think, I'm just going to do what I want, then Krishna says, you do not get perfection. Nasasidhim, he does not get perfection, nor does he get happiness. Sukham, no happiness. And not parangatin, he never attains the supreme destination. He remains in the cycle of birth and death, birth and death, birth and death, birth and death. Why? Because Vartate kama karata. He's simply engaged in the path of his lust. He's simply following the path of his own whimsical desire, which is actually an imposition of Maya. It's the demands of the mind that have nothing to do with the soul, as we've been describing in the previous chapter. That the first problem of the living entity is he becomes attracted by the promises of sense enjoyment of his materialistic intelligence, who's embodied in the person of this queen, this woman who's appeared before him. And she says, just come and enjoy with me for 100 years. You know, she seduces poor Paranjana. So the materialistic intelligence seduces us into thinking this is going to be great. That's kamakarta, simply following the lust, the lusty intelligence. And it just goes in a big circle, repeated birth and death. Prabhupada writes here, it's a little bit of a poetic translation, that he goes up and down from a microbe in stool to a high position in the Brahmaloka planet, and again down, and up and down, and up and down, simply absorbed in the different types of materialistic pleasures. So, that's the topic for today. Hare Krishna. Any reflections or comments, questions?
Question.
Yeah. I'll give you the mic just so that Dr. Reed can hear, if that's okay. Jonathan, you want to bring the mic to Jagadish? Come here. Yeah, she's going to do it. Don't worry for you. She'll do it. She'll do it. It's good. Good service. Thank you, John.
Thank you. I was just wondering about, there's that one place where Srila Prabhupada says that there's even a chance of, even in a royal road, there can be an accident.
Yeah.
So is it that, like, a king may be allowed, like Srila Prabhupada said, if he's very less, if he wants to eat meat really bad, then he can do this, but it sounds like he doesn't, not really advised.
Yeah. To go hunt. Yep.
Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's a very good, a good interpretation. I'm going to try to pull up that quote really quick. Thank you. It's from the Bhagavad Gita report. I want to see if we can find the context really quick. Let's see. We'll just go to the database and search here. So yeah, this license, Prabhupada uses the phrase license for sense gratification. But ultimately, sense gratification is meant to be given up. This phrase, there's a lot of really nice phrases. Here we go. This is just a little snippet from one Bhagavatam verse. This is Prabhupada's disciples commenting, but this is from Srimad-Bhagavatam 10:59-41. It is well known that material wealth and power tend to produce arrogance, and thus an opulent life can often be the royal road to hell. But anyway, we're looking for something else. Let me see if I can just get the Bhagavad Gita. There we go. Bhagavad Gita is. Here we go. That's good. Here we go. 334. All right. So the verse here is Indriyas yarte raga dvesha vyavastita tayor navasham agachet tau hyasya paripantanao. This raga dvesha is coming up in this verse again, attachment and aversion, and the translation is this. There are principles to regulate attachment and aversion pertaining to the senses and their objects. One should not come under the control of such attachment and aversion because they are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. Let's just read the purport. Those who are in Krishna consciousness are naturally reluctant to engage in material sense gratification. But those who are not in such consciousness should follow the rules and regulations of the revealed scriptures. So he's saying that the devotee naturally gives up sense gratification because they see it as empty. They experience it as empty, actually, because Krishna is not there. Real pleasure means Krishna consciousness. So a devotee is naturally averse to materialistic activity. But those who are not in such consciousness, in other words, us, practitioners, persons aspiring, should follow the rules and regulations of the revealed scriptures. Unrestricted sense enjoyment is the cause of material engagement. What's that song? Deva Madhava has been hitting the music, giving music purports. This body is a cage. It's different.
That's an Arcade Fire song. My body is a cage.
My body is a cage. Yeah, that's Arcade Fire.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. My body is a cage. Material engagement.
Would you like me to play it on the?
No, we should just send it. We should just send it to Deva Madhava. But I guess that may not be the time period. He said it was more like 80s, 90s. That was pretty recent. Anyway, maybe it'll fly. We'll see if he wants it. My body is a cage. The one who follows the rules and regulations of the revealed scriptures does not become entangled by the sense objects. One who follows the rules and regulations of the revealed scriptures does not become entangled by the sense objects. For example, sense enjoyment is a necessity for the conditioned soul, and sex enjoyment is allowed under the license of marriage ties. According to scriptural injunctions, one is forbidden to engage in sex relationships with any women other than one's wife. All other women are to be considered as one's mother. But in spite of such injunctions, a man is still inclined to have sex relationships with other women. These propensities are to be curbed, otherwise they will be stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. In other words, they will cause fall down. Stumbling block means a fall down. You hit it and then you fall down. And do you get back up? Can you keep making progress? Maybe you fall down and you get injured, and it's very difficult to continue making progress, right? If you stumble, you fall, you get hurt. You fall into a pit. You gotta climb your way out, and you lose a lot of valuable time. As long as the material body is there, the necessities of the material body are allowed, but under rules and regulations, and yet we should not rely upon the control of such allowances. In other words, we shouldn't think, oh, well, I'm married, therefore I can have as much sex as I want because I have a license for sex in married life. Or I'm a king, like Puranjan, I'm a king, and therefore I'm given license to hunt, so I can go out and hunt and kill whatever I want. That's also mistaking the purpose. License is meant to curb the tendency. Does that make sense? It's not meant to be abused. And yet we should not rely upon the control of such allowances. One has to follow those rules and regulations unattached to them, because practice of sense gratification under regulations may also lead one to go astray, as much as there is always the chance of an accident, even on the railroads. Although they may be very carefully maintained, no one can guarantee that there will be no danger even on the safest road. The sense enjoyment spirit has been current a very long time, owing to material association. Therefore, in spite of regulated sense enjoyment, there is every chance of falling down. Therefore, any attachment for regulated sense enjoyment must also be avoided by all means. But attachment in Krishna consciousness, or acting always in the loving service of Krishna, detaches one from all kinds of sensory activities. Therefore, no one should try to be detached from Krishna consciousness at any stage of life. So detachment from sense enjoyment is good, but we should become very, very attached to Krishna and our Krishna conscious activities. The whole purpose of detachment from all kinds of sense gratification, sense attachment, is ultimately to become situated on the platform of Krishna consciousness. So thank you for bringing that analogy up. Prabhupada is saying that we shouldn't justify sense and enjoyment. We should be very careful to never justify. And I was giving in the beginning, I was giving different types of justifications people give for eating meat, even though intellectually they accept that it's a bad thing, but then they justify it. We shouldn't justify it because we're actually harming ourselves. We're meant to become detached from sensual pleasure because it's a lie. It's a cheating system. That we were hearing that the body is just like a city, and the consciousness is like a king, and it goes out with the different friends, the senses, to enjoy some beautiful form, some very pleasing touch, some very pleasing smell to the different cities of these places, and then it comes back and it's all finished. It's very fleeting. There's no real satisfaction there. It's just basically diversion. In fact, in French language, entertainment, the word for entertainment is divertissement. Diversion. It's just a diversion. Just a diversion. Entertainment. It's just something to divert my mind for some time. That's all it is.
From impending death.
Yeah. Just to distract me from the misery of my existence. That's all. That's very French. So, any other reflections, comments, questions?
Your story, like at the beginning, reminded me of my upbringing of.
Here, let me give you the mic. John, can you give Evan the microphone? This is the microphone. You want to bring it to him? Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you. yeah, it reminded me of you're talking about your story of your Christian friend,
Yeah.
and it was making me think of being raised Jehovah's Witness, and I always had this. I never liked eating meat like growing up as a kid. I think like the only thing I really liked eating was like chicken nuggets.
Yeah.
But and I used to like ask questions about like why is it okay to like kill animals, and the Jehovah's Witness teachings, they teach you that animals aren't souls, or
Yeah.
animals aren't like they're basically just food for us, and
Yeah.
and it wasn't. I think I went through a very similar situation as your friend. I think the vegetarianism opened me up to Krishna consciousness, because I was on a path where I had already become a vegetarian before I met the devotees, and I was actually looking for a Christian group that was a vegetarian. So naturally, I eventually discovered like Seventh-day Adventists. But
They're vegetarians, aren't they?
yeah, they're vegetarians.
Most of
and
They eat like fish, I think, or something. But
I don't know. I didn't spend enough time there because I didn't really feel the nectar in that group.
Sure.
But I tried. But then I ended up going to, a yoga festival and meeting Deva.
Nice.
It's like vegetarianism
Nice.
and music. I'm like, all right, let's
Nice.
try this.
Yeah. Nice.
So it literally was the vegetarian thing that drew me in immediately, because it was like growing up as a Christian, it's like you think, okay, these guys are like Hindus, and I was always told that like Hindus were bad people or demonic individuals, but you can just the vibe, and you could just tell that the nectar was there. The good stuff was there as soon as you just got a little association. So that was just kind of what I was thinking about.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Yeah, there's a lot of empowerment that comes from this giving up of unwanted things. It's very empowering. We reclaim our vital energy. And in the Mahabharata, there's different sections that praise one who gives up eating meat. The act of giving up meat is as good as performing all kinds of sacrifices for the pleasure of the Lord. It's like equivalent to so many thousands of yajnas. And so we want to embrace a regulated life, make our consciousness aligned, fully aligned, embrace with these vidhis, these rules and regulations, because that's where the mercy is. And from your story and the one I shared, and so many stories of people who, they really experienced a jump forward, a leap forward in their spiritual awakening by giving up these activities. And that applies to not just meat eating, but intoxication, gambling, illicit sex. All these things constitute serious obstacles. And by avoiding them, then we're ensuring that we'll have smooth forward progress. So that's a helpful verse to think about. This it's like 263, I think. Bhagavad Gita 263. Raga Vesha Vimuktais Vishayan Atma Vashar Videyatma Prasadam Adhigachati. That's a good mantra to hold on to, that if our mind is moving towards some illicit activity that we can think, no prashadam for you. No prashadam. Alright? Hare Krishna. Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. More Bhaktivedanta ki jai.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.